And we should see participants coming in. A few minutes, here they come. So we have set this up as a webinar, so the only folks on screen will be Lonnie and Tom and ourselves. Everyone else will be there, but in the background. So we can let folks know how you'd like to take questions. We could do that through chat. Is chat your preference? I mean, in the room.
It doesn't make any difference. Is somebody going to monitor, or because I can't always get it on my screen when I have a full screen. What's that?
I will monitor the chat.
Okay. Your voice kind of breaks up once in a while. That's why I keep asking.
Yeah, it's probably because of the meeting owl. I'm not standing right next to it. Is that better?
Okay, that is better. Excellent.
Okay. I will speak into the owl, as will anybody else who needs to ask questions at the end or whatever. If you come up and speak into this owl, that's our microphone and our camera and our speaker. So thank you, ALA, for the grant, which paid for it. Okay. I think it's quite, let's see, we have about a minute. I see 13 folks joining us, and I think we had over 30 register. So we'll just give it another minute or two to get everybody on. So as long as I have a captive audience. I'm the library director here, Chris Johnson. And for the folks at home, I'm sorry. I don't know if you could see probably the back of my head. We have a couple other programs that are coming up that I want everybody to know about. Next Wednesday in this room, also a hybrid event. We're having a panel discussion on Dominion Energy, the Millstone nuclear power plant. So we have 4 folks here that will be taking questions from facilitators. It's at 6:30 on Wednesday, February 16th, and there will be about a half hour at the end for public questions. So join us on Zoom or in person. And again, actually that's a grant funded project as well. It's from Libraries Transforming Communities Focus on Small and Rural Libraries Grant, which is from the American Library Association in collaboration with the Association for Rural and Small Libraries. Also from the American Library Association in partnership with the National Endowment for the Humanities, we have a grant to do a discussion on 5 different women's suffrage titles starting at the end of March. I have samples of the books there that you can take a look at. It's going to be kind of a rapid pace per the grant. So a different book will be discussed every 2 weeks. Feel free to grab a bookmark. And this year we are also launching our Great Decisions Global Topics for Local Discussion, funded by Connecticut Humanities in partnership with Southeast Connecticut World Affairs Council, where we'll be discussing a number of topics on world affairs. You don't need to be an expert. You just need to get a copy of the briefing book, which we provide thanks to the Connecticut Humanities, read the chapter and meet and discuss. It's going to be about 15 weeks total, starting March 3rd and running through the end of May on Thursday nights. So that's my little spiel. I will turn it over to Kim. I would say probably right here next to the owl. Okay.
Good evening. I've got to stand up higher than the owl for a minute if I can. I'm one of those people that needs a stool. I'm Kim Blake, and I'm part of the program committee of the American Association of University Women, AAUW. And we're co-sponsoring this event with the Waterford Public Library. So thank you very much to the library for sponsoring this and for your technical assistance with the program. American Association of University Women is a national organization that supports women and girls educationally, some of that through scholarships. I want to thank all of you who are here, either in person or listening to us virtually. And I'm going to let Tom Shuk and Lonnie Braxton introduce themselves at the beginning of the program, but I want to tell you just for a moment about how this program came to be. in October at a planning meeting, maybe even before the planning meeting, I had agreed to offer somebody some kind of a program for Black History Month in February. And I thought about it. And in October, I read in the paper about the Black Heritage Trail in New London, and that was intriguing to me. And so I contacted some folks, and finally through Laura Natouche, New London Landmarks Director, I was connected with Tom Shuk and Lonnie Braxton, and they have graciously agreed to talk about the development of this project, how they've been involved, and I'm excited to hear more about it. They both have a lot of enthusiasm for the project. And as soon as the weather is nice, I think some of us would probably like to walk some of the landmarks in the Black Heritage Trail, but they're going to tell us all about how the trail has been developed. They won't tell us about each of the 15 stops along the trail because we'd be here all night, but they're going to tell us about several selected ones. So without further ado, I'm going to ask Tom Shuk and Lonnie Braxton to introduce themselves. Thank you, gentlemen.
And thank you to the Waterford Library and the AAUW for giving us to tell this important story. My story, I'm a retired guy. I'm a avid interest in history. And I started a couple of years ago looking at obscure and hidden history. And one thing led to another. And I found a couple of stories that had never been told and decided to pursue that. In real life, I used to run a restaurant for teenage males for about 38 years, and I retired. I was starting to get the hang of it. But at any rate, Lonnie, I turn it over to you to give a little bio, and then we'll get started.
Okay, my name is Lonnie Braxton. I followed Tom Shuk. I retired after about 30 years as a prosecutor. I was born in Mississippi many years ago. And I've always had an interest in history that basically came from my parents. Through a bit of good fortune, Tom Shuk and I each other, and we are pursuing our avocation of researching history. It's really great.
Okay, thank you. And while we're at it, I just want to take one moment to, by the way, wish Lonnie Braxton happy birthday. We're one day late, but it's his birthday yesterday. So congratulations on another one, Lonnie. Okay, let's get started. Let me go full screen here. The title of this is we're going to be talking about the Black Heritage Walking Trail in New London. Kind of call it it's the half that's never been told. New London history. I'm a New London native. When I grew up in New London, everybody knew about Nathan Hale, Benedict Arnold industry, but we didn't know much about stories like this. This is Robert Jacqueline. In 1817, what they call the freemen, the voters of New London, voted to allowing him to buy any land or even live have a business in London, town of New London. And I thought, geez, I never heard of that. That goes back to 1717. I wonder what stories are there that I haven't heard. So I started to look into that. Here it is 200 years later. New London looks a lot different. Okay, this is the city council in 2019. This project really got started. And some other things have happened along the way. If you recall, the issues of racial justice and equity have been in the forefront of the nation nationally for the last couple of years. Okay, so part of our response to that is to develop New London's Black Heritage, the story, the half that's never been told. The inspiration for all of this occurred about 2 years. I came across a story. I was doing some research on New London schools, and I came across a story of a guy who started a school for Black children in response to a crime in the town where parents were upset about Black children being educated with white children. I never heard anything about this. This is in 1837. And the most remarkable was that when Ichabod Pease stepped forward to do this, he was 81 years old. I thought, how come we don't know? So I started looking into it. I ended up getting in touch with Lauren Natush from Landmarks, and she offered to initiate a fundraiser to restore his way of recognizing him. So we did. We had a program. And we ended up raising money to restore the stones. You can see the before and after stones down there. And this was, we did it at St. James Church, which is where, by the way, Ichabod Pease was a member back in 37. And in the audience that night, this was the picture of the audience. Several people who ended up being involved in this project were there. Nicole Thomas is in the center of that picture. That's me at the standing at the rostrum. Laura Natush was the host of the event. Out of the picture here, Lonnie Braxton was sitting in the front row. Okay, and a guy named Curtis Goodwin was in the back of the audience. And this was the very beginning of it. And that was the beginning of mine. I want to give Lonnie a couple minutes to tell what his reaction to all that was and how he hooked into this. Lonnie?
Thank you. It was quite exciting because I've always enjoyed history. And as he's talking about and some of the other things he had uncovered, going through the books at Town Hall, I have walked by buildings in town. And some of these buildings I had walked by turned out to be very, not only for New London, but for Black folk who had lived in New London. And I had to have read a book recently, and that book was called Red Summer. In fact, here, and I can show you. So I'm reading Red Summer, and in it, on page 1, it talked about a riot that took place in New London at the whole. Most people have no idea where the Hotel Bristol happens to be. Well, it's downtown. And if you remember where Roberts Electronics happens to be, it is a couple doors down. In 1919, the Red Summer, and this is and you can see there's a little arrow there, and you can see by the door of New London Inc. and the door to the Barry's Ice is there. That's where the Bristol Hotel was located. Now, the plaque has an entrance that was actually taken from the London Day, and this on May 30th, 1919. The Evening Day said, in an effort for Negro on the street, a mob of 400 or more white sailors, aided and abetted by ex-servicemen and Marines, started a fight Thursday night that filled the principles of the city with a howling night of excited men and made it necessary to sound the riot call on the fire alarm at 10:36. This resulted in over 5,000 people surrounded, screaming and yelling for the Black folk who had used this as a social location out. And it caused quite a ruckus. The press had reported this as a riot that was initiated by the Black sailors. But upon investigation, that there had been rumblings for some time. And as a result of the investigation by officials, it was found that, in fact, there had been a fight with some white sailors. And investigation said that the Black sailors were not the cause, but this caused. And as a result of this incident, it was reported nationally. But then I found out there was a second one a few weeks later. And if you look slide there are some newspaper clippings of the day where it says Canellas riot in New London and quelled by the Marines. I mean, colored and street white sailors battle Negroes at New London. This was quite a stir. And if you think about 1919, it was called Red Summer for a reason, because a lot of servicemen were one, both Black and white, and people of color who had been fighting in Europe were asserted a bit. And that was in return met by a bit of serious. But back to that second episode. A few weeks later, there's another outbreak. The only reason we know about that is because while en route with Marines and MPs, the truck that was carrying them hit a fire downtown New London, damaged a fire hydrant. The government, the sub base wasn't going to, the city of New London became angry. And as a result of this battle, that is the only reason that one was. And if you get a chance to read the newspaper clippings, they're quite enlightening to what is actually transpiring today. And that's basically the Hotel Bristol.
Okay. Back up for a second. I wanted to go back to this one here. I wanted to give you an idea. This is what the plaque, this was the first one for Ichabod Pease. There's about 150 words on it. We're developing these. We thought, you can only say so much in 150 words. So each one has a what's called a QR code, which I had no idea what it was, being of a certain gender. But you can hold your smartphone up to this plaque, and it will link you to a web page which looks like what you saw a minute ago with on Lonnie on the Hotel Bristol, a background, and it tells the whole story of what really happened. Okay, I wanted to go to back up just for 1 second. I want to tell you about Robert Jacqueline. This was the incident that goes back to 1717, that where he was, they tried to prevent him from buying the land. He ended up buying the land anyway, okay? But they actually entered an official notice in the town records saying that the first selectman had gone to the seller and cautioned him not to sell this land to this Robert Jacqueline. I don't know if you've ever been down into the City Hall property records vault, but it's an amazing place. That's where I found this record right here. That's the original record from 1717. The first selectman at that time, you might recognize, there's a signature there in the middle of the page. It's Joshua Hempstead. It's Joshua Hempstead, the diarist from the Hempstead House. He was they called him the selectman at that time, but he's the one that issued the caution. This is the plaque that's on the Robert Jacqueline site. It took us it was a little bit of a trick to find it, because back in those property records in those days, they didn't have streets or numbered houses or anything like that. It was the walnut bush next to the stone wall by the creek that was, where the stone wall turned. So we had to track it down. We did track it down. If you're familiar with New London, this is called Mayhem Park. It's at the intersection of Vauxhall Street and Ledgard Street. And the plaque is approximately where that arrow is. It's actually a little further back from where that arrow is. It's a playground in a park, but it's out in a public place where a lot of people have an opportunity to see it. Okay. Lonnie, I want to go back to you, and let's go down to Mr. Linwood Bland. Can you tell us about Mr. Linwood Bland, please? You're muted. Lonnie, you're muted.
Yeah, you live in a town and you know people and you talk to them without really having an idea, basically, of how important they are. Mr. Linwood Bland, I knew personally. He wrote a book. That book was called A View from the 60s. It was the bestseller, and it was the bestseller for the New London Historical Society. And that book was basically typed at my house. So every day when I would come home from work, I would talk to Mr. Bland, because he'd be waiting in front of my house to come inside and learn how to use the computer, because he was doing it on old word processor. But here's a guy whose family came from North Carolina to Connecticut. His grandmother was living in the household with him when he was a child, and she had been a slave when she was born. So he was a man who had actually lived with a person who had been enslaved. And he came to New London because his father was here working. He served in 2 wars. He was president of the NACP. He was a tax protester because he didn't pay his taxes. So he had such a colorful life. This slide is a photo of the house he lived in after the house that he originally was living in was actually it was demolished because of urban renewal. But he lived there from the mid-60s until he died. And this house was recently sold. That's a photo of Mr. Bland in front of his house. And they're talking about him staking his claim and fighting no representation without taxation, for lack of better words. And at the end of the day, Mr. Bland, and this is a slide of the dedication after the house had been restored. And Landmarks actually had sold the house to a family that now lives there. And the mayor, dignitaries of the town, New London Landmarks. There's also a descendant of Mr. Bland there. We could go through that whole list and talk for half hour about the people who were there. But he was quite a man. And if you like detective work, I think that's why Mr. Shook and I were involved in this, because each and every day you uncover something that leads you further down the trail.
Okay, just to mention some of the people in that picture, that's Lonnie Braxton is in the center of that picture, right next to Jean Jordan in the orange dress. And the next guy that we're going to talk about is to the right. You can see he's wearing a white shirt and he has his COVID-19 mask around his chin. That's Mr. Spencer Lancaster. And that's the next guy we want to talk about. This is the plaque at his house. Lonnie?
Well, Mr. Lancaster, the plaque speaks for itself. One big difference about Mr. Lancaster is he's living history. He's in his 90s and he's alive today, and you can actually talk to him. He's an unbelievable guy. He also served in the war, came back to New London, actually experienced housing discrimination, job discrimination, ran for office, one of the first Black, I think the first Black elected official in New London. And he's never given up. He's sharp, he's committed. There was a minstrel show that was held every year here in the London area. One of his first acts in the 60s was to protest it. He actually had to stop. He started work at a local auto dealership, Linda Dodge. He worked his way from cleaning cars to servicing cars to being one of the salesmen. And the thing that amazed us so much in interviewing and talking to him, he sold more cars, not than any Dodge salesman in Connecticut, but in the country. He was one of the top salesmen, was honored for so. And under normal conditions, he probably would have had his own dealership. But due to certain circumstances, basically who he was not allowed that privilege. But we could go on for days about him. But if you really want to steep yourself in what we got involved in, when the weather is warm, just the plaques we've talked about, if you read those, they will inspire you. Because this isn't just for Black History Month. This is actually true American history. As Shook said, it's the part that wasn't told. And if we tell all of the history, we all have a stake in it.
I just want to comment on this picture. A couple of years ago, we did Kevin Booker hosted a Green Book conversation over at the Groton Library. And you'll notice in the panel, we had a panel discussion. I did a little slideshow of the Green Book sites around New London. And Mr. Spencer Lancaster was one of the lead speakers. You can see Mr. Braxton is off to the left. He was there also. Reverend Clark and Dr. Mitchell were there also. But at that time, Mr. Lancaster was 92 years old, and he told such a poignant story. I mean, there wasn't a dry eye in the house when he told his story. Very, very touching. He's a wonderful, wonderful man. That poster up at the top was a campaign poster from one of his first, he was the first Black elected official. That's one of his campaign posters. I'm sorry you can't read it. I didn't get a very good copy of it, but that was that was around 1960. Okay, this is his house. There's the plaque in front of his house. This is the only plaque that's actually on private property. All the others are public property. This is the plaque in front of his house where he's lived since the where did he live in the mid-50s? I think he's lived there. Yes. Right. Yeah. And he's still up and about, and we are so lucky to still have. I compare this to the story that I just told a few minutes ago about Robert Jacqueline. That was 300 years ago. So this Black Heritage Trail covers right up until today. We have somebody who is part of it, who is still alive and still, can talk with us. And we shouldn't forget that this house is also still in their family. Even though he's no longer living there because of age, his family still owns the house and family members still reside there. And his campaign slogan was equal opportunity for every citizen. And this was in the 60s. Right. Okay, we have a couple of very special women that we want to talk about tonight. My personal feeling is that these two women should be national figures, and they have been overlooked. A couple of years ago, I came across, you may be familiar with Prudence Crandall's school up in Canterbury. In 1832-33, she started a school for white children, and she was approached by this lady right here, Sarah Harris, later Sarah Harris Fairweather. And Prudence Crandall accepted her into the school, created a huge furor. She ended up closing down the school, and then she reopened the school exclusively for young ladies and little misses of color. This was the first lady there, okay? And I was doing some research on her, and I found a guy saying that, well, after they left Canterbury, they moved to New Haven. I did some research in New London. I found out it wasn't New Haven. She moved to New London. She lived on Broad Street, New London. I found her house. I found the deed. Her husband was a blacksmith. The blacksmith shop was on the grounds of the court, where the courthouse is now on Broad Street. It used to be WMI. It used to be St. Bernard's. And of course, it's long gone. The blacksmith shop is long gone. But that was right there. And I thought, geez, I went to St. Bernard's. I never heard anything about Sarah Harris or the Fairweathers. We need to know more about it. So there's a huge story connected with Sarah Harris is one of 4 sisters who were very active in the civil rights, abolition movement, the Underground Railroad, and the education movement, and Black suffrage back in the 1840s. So that's a story that really needs to be told. Hopefully, we're going to help bring her to the fore here. This is where the house used to be. It's approximately 90 Broad Street. Across the street is Fisher Florist, if you're familiar with New London. It's right there. And the house was approximately in the middle of where these two houses are. The house was torn down around 1868. They built the house on the left, 1867 maybe. There's no evidence there, but the plaque is right where that arrow is. Okay, this was the old neighborhood where they lived. Over to the left is the blacksmith shop near the courthouse. Their house is on Broad Street, right where I just showed you. Right behind them, there were backyard neighbors to Henry Havens. He's the guy that donated, the whaling agent that donated the money for the library. His sister was Frances Manwaring Calkins, who wrote the History of New London, which is still the Bible of New London history. And about 2 blocks away, you'll see William and Celinda Anderson. That's Celinda Harris Anderson. That's one of Sarah's sisters. One of 3 who lived in New London, and the 4th one was also involved, but she didn't actually live here. Okay, she deserves more recognition. Prudence Crandall is our state heroine, but Sarah Harris is the one who broke the color barrier. She deserves some credit too. This house is 73 Hempstead Street, is arguably one of the, if not the most significant house in London in terms of Black history. It started out, it was built by an abolitionist at a time when no one would sell to Blacks. Civilian Haley built 5 houses, sold them at cost to free Blacks at a time when nobody would do that. Okay, that's 1842. The first person that bought the house, the first couple, was John and Lavinia Ruggles Parkes. Okay, Lavinia Ruggles is the sister of David Ruggles, who was one of the most famous freedom fighters and abolitionists, founded the New York Committee of Vigilance, helped 600 people escape to freedom, including Frederick Douglass. Okay, in fact, Frederick Douglass got married at his house. He helped to arrange the service. Famous guy.
And we should
jump ahead of.
We should note that Ruggles was also a Black man at the time when it was quite difficult for someone such as him to raise the kind of money and be able to do the kind of work he did, because a lot of the things that he was doing, he was actually paying for out of his own pocket.
Yes, he was.
His sister was quite privileged to have him as a brother because it was very difficult that time.
But who knew that David Ruggles actually was born in Lyme and he grew up in Norwich. But I never knew that his sister lived here. He had another sister who lived over on Federal Street. So there were 2 Ruggles here in town. The other lady that I think deserves recognition is Sadie Harrison. Okay. Sadie Harrison lived in the house at 73 Hempstead Street. She bought it in 1926. It had been from 1845 until 1926. It was in one continuous family, the Parkes and their descendants. She bought the house. her claim to fame, one of her claims to fame, is that many of us have heard of the Green Book. It's the Negro Motorist Green Book. It's a travel guide, very famous, was published for 30 years. And that's the only one most people know about. What they don't know is that there was a precursor of that book. And the precursor was written by this lady right here. And she did it while she was living at 73 Hempstead Street, New London. It's called the Jacqueline Harrison's Hotel and Apartment Guide for Colored Travelers, 1930. It's 7 years before the Green Book came out. And she did all the research. She was the executive secretary of the United Negro Welfare Council here in New London. She probably relied on her contacts through that, but she did develop the book the old-fashioned way, in that she was making telephone calls and writing letters. And that's how she developed listings for 300 cities across the country that she put into her book. I mean, this is a wonderful service. And it's interesting because if you look at the top and the bottom here, you see the white paper and the green printed paper down below, the green print. That's a comparison of Sadie Harrison's book up above. And the second part is the Green Book. And if you look, the same 5 names that appear in the Green Book are listed by Sadie Harrison. Sadie Harrison did a lot of the heavy lifting for Victor Green and the Green Book. Now, with all due respect to Victor Green, he did an incredible job. He expanded on that. Sadie Harrison had only listed apartments and tourist homes and hotels. Victor Green was much more extensive, included restaurants, garages, repairs, barbershops, businesses, all kinds of stuff over the 30-year run that he had. So credit to both of them. But I think that that Sadie Harrison deserves some credit for doing the pioneering work that she really did. And by the way, one of the people who utilized her back when she first started at that little house on Hempstead Street, she got contacted by probably one of the 2 most prominent Black men in the country, okay, who was coming to New London and needed a place to stay. If you notice at the top of that page, you'll see Mohegan Hotel and Crocker House are listed with W. Those were white only in 1930. Okay, a lot of us don't know that. So when this guy came to New London, he couldn't stay at the Mohegan Hotel. So he asked her if she knew of what he called a colored boarding house where he could stay on his journey. Unbeknownst to him, she was at that very moment developing her book. It was in November of 1929. And when he ended up coming and staying with her, and that man was W.E.B. Du Bois. Okay, again, one of the most prominent men in America, but he couldn't stay at the Mohegan Hotel. So anyway, this is a story that needs to be told. This is her house. In the picture on the left, the 73 Hempstead Street is the little house on the right. Okay, that's what it looked like in 1905. On the newer picture, that's what it looks like today. You can see it's been totally renovated. You may be able to see the foundation. If you look at the foundation, you can see some stones versus some concrete. The original footprint may have been, it was obviously much smaller, but these are the houses that Civilian Haley built. There were 5 of them, 1, 2, 3, you can see them right there. And anyway, she lived there. And one of the other people that Mr. Braxton was talking about a few minutes ago, Linwood Bland, spent time as a child in that house when he was in 1935, when he first came up. They lived a couple of years in this house. And Spencer Lancaster, his aunt, was also a resident of that house. So it's tied through with our history for 100 years. It's almost 200 years now. 180 years. So it's a great story.
We should add also there are other people like Sarah Cheney. There are people we're still exploring. Women would like to include. They are alive. They lived in this house.
That's right. Sarah Cheney did too.
What we would talk to people about this. Oh, I lived there, or my nephew or my relative lived there. It was amazing.
It is amazing when you hear that. You realize, oh my God, this is not ancient history. This is stuff that's still going on right now. Okay. I just want to briefly, that should advance. Oops. Okay. Go back 1 there. This is basically what the Black Heritage Trail looks like. It's a rough map. I apologize for it. It's not completely totally accurate, but basically it shows the loop of about 13 of the 15 places. Mr. Lancaster's house is a little bit off the screen to the left. It's probably a little too far to walk. It's on Rogers Street. The Jacqueline site is up Broad Street, just a little bit beyond, a few blocks beyond where you see the Dunkin' Donuts up there. But it's probably a little too far to walk. You can cover it though, but you can get the address and you can drive by it and stop there. But if you're going to do the walking tour, this makes a pretty efficient loop around, and you can see it's around the downtown area of New London. Okay. It's also connected to the, it's going to be appearing on the Connecticut Freedom Trail. Thames River Heritage Boat Tour is already talking about including it somehow. And it's also close to a number of other historic places in downtown New London. If you take that Black Heritage Trail, you're going to go walking right by Union Station, right by Nathan Hill School. The Custom House is one of the sites because of the Amistad. I can't see the next one, but the Shaw Mansion is down there too. My screen is blocked here, but they're all right down there. So it's really going to tie into a lot of New London. We also, Lonnie, if you want to tell us about the plans for the future.
Well, the plans for the future is a history of his people. That's what we're trying to do. If you'd like to join us in our quest, please do, because it's an exciting adventure and there's never a dull moment. As we walked the city ourselves looking at sites, we started to talk about, did you hear this? Did you figure this out? Or guess what stood here? There were places that sailors came when they were embarking on whaling voyages. These things need to be explored. There are books. A young woman by the name of Anne Farrow wrote a book about called the Log Books, where she did some research on the whaling vessels that left New London and the Black people were on them. And this was some of everybody. So we are quite, I guess, early in our journey. Would it be fair to say, Mr. Shaw?
Yeah, this book, the reason I put this book up here, this was a book that was published about 30 years ago, I think, by Carmelina Kanzler, who recruited a whole bunch of people to talk about the diversity of New London. And you can see all the different chapters they cover. She had somebody who represented each of those different cultures, and they wrote about it. You can see there's a Greek, there's a Poles, there's Blacks, there's the Native Americans. So in addition to expanding on the Black Heritage Trail, which we hope to do. I should have said this at the beginning. We were limited to, based on funding and time constraints and whatnot, we had to choose 15 stories to do, okay? We could have chosen twice that, okay, and
Easily.
More. But we had to pick them. So this is what we emphasize, that this is a first step. This is a beginning step. There's a New London's history, it goes back, it's 1646. There are tremendous stories of all kinds of diverse cultures that deserve to be told. And we're finally getting around to telling this part of the story, some of the Black heritage stories that are largely hidden and unknown, but there's many, many more to tell. And we look forward to the opportunity to do that.
Excuse me, Tom.
Yes.
It's Chris Johnson at the library. We're getting a question. Where can folks pick up a map of the trail? That's from Mary Ellen.
Right now, that map exists in my mind and on this screen. There isn't, again, this Black Heritage Trail was only introduced last October. Okay, and we've been sort of impacted by the pandemic and by the winter. So the plans are kind of on hold right now. We knew that there aren't going to be many people walking around in the snow. So come springtime, hopefully there will be some more formalized information and whatnot available. And we're going to try to get that out there. There is a webpage right now where you can see all of them. It's called visitnewlondon.org. But if you just go on my friend Dr. Google, his page, and put in New London Black Heritage Trail, that should come up. And you will see, it will list all of the sites, all of the addresses are there, along with all the web pages on each one. You can learn more about each one, and you can do a you can do a virtual tour that way, but you can also use that to determine, you know, the sites and the route. But that map that I showed you, it will include about 13. It needs more work. I am actually a map guy, but not drawing maps. I like to look at maps. So it's a little trickier when you come down and you try to use Google to try to Google Street View to try to get all those things. For one thing, they only allow you to put 10 places on. And you know, we want to put on 15. So right away, there's a limitation. Somebody above my pay grade needs to do that. Hopefully they will do that this spring. All right, I just want to finish up. There's one thing. New London is a microcosm of the story of America. Thanks to the Black Heritage Trail, New London has finally begun to include the half that's never been told. And that's it. So if there are any questions, we'll be happy to entertain them.
Well, we'll see if there's questions here in the room, but we did have some comments in the chat, in particular from Annie Darling, and I'll just take a moment to read what she said so everyone can hear. She said, "You're blowing me away with this history. Oh my gosh. I've been saying for many years that we have so much history in our area. It has been a long time coming that we acknowledge our Black history and the accomplishments that these people have given to our society. I cannot thank you all enough, and I'm happy to get involved in any future projects you may embark upon. I'm with you in all of your investigations."
Wow,
And-
thank you.
Thank you very
So
much.
it sounds like Annie's really very interested. So Annie, maybe you send me an email here at the library at cjohnson@waterfordct.org. I'll make sure to put you in touch with our presenters. Joanne Moore has said a million thanks. Pam McDonald, brilliant presentation. Thank you for this great work. Marcus Brucoli, thank you very much. We enjoyed it. And we do have a room here of people, about 14, 15 folks. Does anybody have questions? Why don't you come right up and speak to the owl?
Tom and Lonnie, this is Hugh Blake. I live in New London. I want to thank you for this presentation. Your enthusiasm is really, truly infectious. I just have one comment to make. It seems to me that as the Coast Guard Museum finally gets planted downtown, if that's where it finally winds up, there's probably a great opportunity to work with them and have people move from the museum out into the community to follow this trail. So I hope you keep that in the back of your mind. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's assuming that they do put it next to the train station. It is right there. It's right in the center. The one of the sites is a place where Frederick Douglass spoke in New London back in 1848. And this was another thing that nobody seemed to know about that. I didn't know about that. Frederick Douglass spoke in New London. And the place where he spoke is about 150 feet away from where the Nathan Hale Schoolhouse is right now. It's the rear entrance to the New London Day building on that. It used to be called a different name. It was Bradley Street. Now it's Atlantic Avenue, but it's right there. You know, it's a stone's throw to the Nathan Hale School. It's another stone's throw to the Union Station. And if the Coast Guard Museum is right next door, they're all right there. So that is a great idea. Yes, yes. In fact, some of the funding that came from this was through the New London Office of Economic Development. And they got a grant to help pay for this from the Eastern Connecticut Tourism Board. So that tells you what they're thinking, that this is something that they think will draw people. Certainly it's going to draw school groups and many other people to come down. It's a reason to come to New London.
And it's real history too. And, and when we, as you mentioned, behind the London Day building, we were walking around looking for another place to place a plaque. And we talk about there should be a plaque there. So we could probably put another 50 up easily.
Okay. I do want to give credit to one guy that I didn't get to before. I mentioned Curtis Goodwin was in the back of the audience that night of the Ichabod Peas. He was so inspired by this. He ran for office, got elected as a city councilman, and he became the chairman of the, where is it here? Economic Development Committee. He worked with Felix Reyes, who was the director of economic development, and they're the guys that put the package together. They contacted Laura Naters from New London Landmarks. New London Landmarks contacted, recruited some researchers, Nicole Thomas, Lonnie Braxton right here, Laura herself, and myself. And that's what got this thing started. But Curtis Goodwin was the driving energy behind this. Along with the support of the city of New London. The city administration has been very, very, very supportive of all of this. So it's wonderful. And again, I hope it's a beginning of something.
Do you have another question? Come on up. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Joanne Davis. Tom Shook is my brother. We and our family are so proud of him for all the work that he has done. And you can tell how passionate he is because he can barely take a breath when he does his presentations. It means so much to him to have done this, and it means so much to us to have him be recognized and be invited to speak to groups such as yours and share this information that has just not been shared before. So Tom, proud of you as always.
Thank you, Joanne. I did not pay her for that, by the way. I didn't even know she was.
Yeah, we
Thank
want
you,
to thank her
Joanne.
for sharing you too, because it takes a lot of time, as well as your wife. We have to also thank your wife, because there were days we went out in the rain working on this, heavy rain.
Lonnie, my enthusiasm for this pales next to the fire of your enthusiasm. So let's get that, let's make sure that's clear too.
Oh, thanks.
And my wife is quite burdened by all of this, by the way, because she has to put up with me while I do this. And so I am very grateful to her for that too. I did want to share this one slide that we missed. These are what the stories on the Black Heritage Trail are about. They're stories of tragedy and triumph, courage and community, resilience and progress in the face of bigotry and prejudice. Goes from ancient history to living history, and it covers 300 years. We're really very, very proud of this. And personally, I am very grateful to have had the opportunity to work with wonderful people like Lonnie and Nicole and Laura and Curtis to help get this thing started. It's very, very, very special. It's an honor.
Any other questions from the room? We did have a few more comments. Nicole Thomas said that she's going to make me cry. Yes, thanks to Kathy. You guys are amazing. And Ann Darling said thanks and great to hear from his sister. I'm in tears listening to this. And Pam McDonald said, yes, tourism board, exclamation point, Chamber of Commerce, exclamation point. So that's our chat. Does anybody from AAW want to come up and say a few words and end the session, or?
Well, I will just say thank you to both of you. It was terrific. I want to hear more, and I want to meet you two in person and walk. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Lonnie. And thank you,
We'll see you in the
Kim.
field.
Yes, and on behalf of the library, we thank you as well. One last comment. I'm so grateful for this presentation and cannot wait to do the tour. I'm also pleased that my chat just shut down here. Have my phone. Has been recorded, which it is. It is being recorded. So,
Well, I do have a question. Will this be available when you say it's recorded? Will it be available to?
Well,
I've had some people contact me who can't come tonight, and
we're
I'm
gonna upload it to the library's YouTube page. So it'll be available there as long as you're comfortable having it available there.
I'm fine. How about you, Lonnie?
Not a problem.
Yeah.
So we should be able to do that tomorrow, and we'll be in touch with the links.
Okay. I do want to give a shout out to my friend Joan. I don't know if she was able to attend. She's recovering from surgery, and I was hoping that maybe she can make it. If not, she'll be one of the people I'll send the link for the recorded version. So I hope she's feeling better.
No one's acknowledging, no one in the rooms.
Can he hear us if we clap?
Yes.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you both, and thank you for everyone who joined us virtually and in person. And I'm glad our meeting now was able to support it tonight. So I'll stop the recording.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.